Hi friends, welcome to GMAT Points video series. I'm Saili Kale. In this particular video, I'll be discussing the study plan for appearing for GMAT. A lot of you must be wondering, when should I start my study? How should I plan my study? When should I take the exam? So in this video, I'll be discussing all of that. How many months do you need to study? When you should start your preparation? When should you actually schedule the test? So let's get started. Over here, I've just basically listed out the different concepts that you have to cover. So this is just a look at the syllabus. This is the syllabus as told by mba.com, by the exam convener as such. So this is the list of concepts they have given. Now the list of concepts that they have given might not seem or might not make sense, a whole lot of sense to you, because you're mostly seeing them in a very abstract way. You know them in a different way. So most of this analyzing passages is reading comprehension. You must have solved reading comprehension before. It's basically about reading passages, analyzing them, answering questions based on them. Inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning is part of critical reasoning. It is also part of your reading comprehension, where reasoning based questions can also come from reading comprehension. But inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning is more or less referring to critical reasoning as such. So here the verbal reasoning, they have mentioned what skills are needed, but the questions that are going to be asked are in the form of a reading comprehension or in the form of a critical reasoning, where a paragraph is given and a critical reasoning question is asked based on that paragraph. So this is basically a fairly short syllabus, not much to do. Covering this syllabus will not take that lot of time, but the only thing to remember over here is that there is a lot of practice needed to master this particular topic. The variety is not very high. The type of questions that are asked are also not very high. In critical reasoning, there will be like a few types of questions that are asked: strengthen, weaken, flaw in argument, parallel reasoning, causal argument. All of these, there are like a limited set of questions that can be asked in critical reasoning. Even in reading comprehension, there are a limited set of questions that are asked. Which of these is the stated idea of the passage? Which of these can be inferred from the passage? So all of these are limited. Same way, both are limited in the scope. It won't take you a lot of time to actually cover that. Maybe in a day you can cover. But the idea is that it's not just knowing what type of questions you're going to be asked. The difficult part is how to actually answer them, and that can only come through practice. So this will basically take a lot of dedicated practice to get to a position where you are able to solve questions confidently. In general, it will take you should read regularly, read and solve passages and critical reasoning questions regularly for a 3-month period or so. If you even give 3-month period, then you should be able to solve these kind of questions. Here I'm assuming that you have some amount of reading comprehension skills, some amount of critical reasoning skills. Basic skills are there. For example, if you have already from a English medium school, if you already are used to articulating yourself in the English language, this should be the amount of time that is taken for you. However, if you are weaker in verbal, if you are somebody who is not used to either reading in English, who maybe never reads in English, maybe comes from a vernacular medium, for you then it might take a longer period, because this is kind of skill based. It takes a longer period to develop the skill. If you're starting from a position that you never read English books, you have not read a book in like the past 1 year, then it might take you more time. But if you're somebody who reads regularly, either if it's books it's good. Even if you read articles online, even that is good. So as long as you read English in some form regularly, 3 months should be enough. If you do not do that, you would need 6 months to actually do this. Let's come to data insights. Data insights is a new type of section that has been introduced in the Focus Edition. Earlier we had integrated reasoning, but it was generally not it was not essentially this intensive. It was not part of your score, so it was much less important, and the number of questions were lesser. The score, it was not really this difficult as it is now when it is part of data insights, because now it is serious, it is part of your score, and the questions are also harder. So over here, what exactly is required of you? So basically, you should be able to read statements or information that is given in terms of caselets, where you are given like verbal information, or you should be able to read information that is given to you in the form of a table, or you should be able to read information that is given as part of a graph, either a scatter plot or a bar chart or a pie chart. Or you should be able to read and solve questions where information is given to you in 3 different tabs of 3 different formats as such, where you have to combine and collate information as such. So this is essentially the skill that is tested. How well can you read information from different types of sources, visual information, verbal information, how good you are at combining and collating different information to answer questions. Now the question types that actually come are: the base concepts that are required to solve data insights questions are statistics, basically understanding what is mean, median, mode, understanding correlation, understanding strong correlation, weak correlation, understanding what is slope of a line. All of these are skills that are required for actually solving data insights. So when you have understanding what is the slope of a line, when it is a greater slope, when it is a lower slope, all of these requires basic understanding of these concepts. Another thing that is required is basically for tables, you should be able to quickly add up tables, find the averages of a column of values, find if you know the assumed mean method, it actually becomes much easier to solve those table based methods as such. Also, you should be able to understand that when a pie chart is given, and if there are two connected data sets, if it is given A or B information, how to combine those two different data information to basically find out information that is missing from either chart as such. So this kind of work is needed to solve these sets. It is difficult, it is challenging, partly because many students are not used to doing that. None of us is somebody who actually goes through a lot of reports and like marks down information from reports or calculates based on reports and does any kind of data crunching, and that is essentially the skill that is being tested over here. So it is slightly difficult to do. This is though there are basically 5 different types of questions: multi-source reasoning, which is basically collating data from different tabs in different formats; table analysis, basically understanding data that is given in a table; graphical interpretation, that is basically interpreting graphs, that are scatter plots, line charts, bar charts, pie charts, any kind of charts; and lastly two-part analysis. Basically it can be quantitative as well as qualitative. It can be puzzles or like time, speed, distance kind of based questions, where you have to basically solve a question and identify the value of two parts of the question as such. The last part is data sufficiency, where data sufficiency in a way tests your understanding of many of the concepts that are asked in quantitative reasoning, including data sufficiency asks you about arithmetic, algebra, number theory. All of that is essentially also part of data sufficiency. So there is significant overlap in skills between these two topics as such, and that should also influence how we actually go about studying. Now, if you consider quantitative reasoning, the first one is number theory. So you have value, order and factor of numbers. So number systems, what are integers, what are fractions, what are decimals, all of that is over here. Factors, divisibility of numbers, cyclicity of factors, all of that, remainders, quotient, all of those basic theorems or basic concepts of number theory are asked in the quantitative reasoning section. So the next part is algebra. So what you need to essentially understand in algebra is understanding linear equations in 2 variables, linear equations in 3 variables, quadratic equations, properties of quadratic equations, inequalities with modulus, linear equations with modulus. All of that is super important. Functions, different types of functions that are there: floor function, ceiling function, modulus function. Then you have graphs, understanding how the graph of a particular function varies with the input. All of these are part of algebra. Algebra in general is not very trivial. It requires some amount of time as such. So while this is simple, this is complicated and this will take you more time to do. Arithmetic, ratio and proportion, fractions, percentages, rate, work, speed and mixtures. These are generally simple questions. They are not very difficult questions to solve. Of the entire section, I feel these are the easiest questions to solve. But having said that, it basically comes from the fact that if you have solved 10 questions of arithmetic, you can easily solve the next 100. Most of the questions tend to be repetitive. So if you practice even a little bit from arithmetic, you will get very good at it. So this is something that you can improve considerably with practice. Now consider the last one, which is statistics, progressions and probability. Statistics is basically finding mean, median, mode. If you add elements to a set, how does it affect the mean? How does it affect the median? How does it affect the mode? Estimation of the mean, median, mode, standard deviation. Understanding set theory, Venn diagrams, counting of cases, permutations and combinations. How many combinations are possible? How many permutations are possible? Based on permutations and combinations, you will then get questions on probability, and then sequences and series. What is the sum of this progression? What is the sum of this series? All of these are part of the quantitative reasoning section. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there is significant overlap between these two sections. Now, because there is overlap between these two sections, we should essentially learn in such a way that the section that you do first helps you in learning the next section. So verbal reasoning and quant reasoning are fairly independent. So you can start with verbal reasoning and quant reasoning, and once base concepts are done for quant reasoning, then you can go to data insights, because many of the data sufficiency questions require concepts of arithmetic, algebra, number systems, number theory, probability and statistics, set theory. All of this basically is kind of revised in the data sufficiency part. So before you actually start with data insights and start with data sufficiency, you should try to finish many of the concepts of QR. So that is one thing. The second thing that you have to remember is that even when you have chart based information or table analysis, a lot of it is basically calculating averages, or a lot of it is basically understanding statistics. What is standard deviation, what is weak correlation, strong correlation. So again, many of the parts of data insights actually require quant concepts. So because there is a dependence on understanding quant concepts, it is better to start with verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning and then start with DI later. So with that in mind, we are giving you a sample plan later on. I'll just show you the plan. But before you actually show, we are giving you a 3-month plan starting from March 1st, how to actually start a plan such that you give the test on May end as such, how to actually practice and prepare in the 3 months from March to May. So I'll just tell you when you should schedule, what you should schedule, what should you keep in mind. So one thing that you should essentially remember is that now this is basically all the concepts that you have to cover. Now that you know what is the syllabus, let us try to figure out what is the right plan for you based on your needs as such. We'll be giving a 3-month plan as such, but that is for like a generalized plan as such. It is not specific to your particular needs. You'll have to tailor that plan according to your needs. So how do you find a tailored plan according to your needs? So what you should essentially think is that take a look at your schedule. From your schedule, figure out when you have a extended period of time when you are able to actually give time, dedicate time to taking an exam. So suppose you are somebody who has generally lesser work around July, August, then you can say that, okay, my test date will be around July, August. Now once you figure out, okay, I'm going to take a test in either May or June or July, August, once you figure out what is the test appointment date, then you have to figure out how many months of work it is going to take you to actually be ready before the test appointment date. So you have to figure out how many hours of study is going to be required, how many hours of study that you can give, how many per week, per day, and how many hours of study overall it is going to require for you to be ready on the test day. So again, take a look at your schedule by trying to figure out how many hours you can give on a weekday, how many hours you can give at the weekend. So suppose you can give 1 to 2 hours on a weekday, and suppose you can give 3 to 6 hours on a weekend. Okay, so this is, suppose this will be like 10 plus like 16 to 20 hours, suppose you can give over a week. Okay, roughly. Now if you can figure out that I can give 16 to 20 hours, the next question that you have to ask is basically how many weeks of preparation is going to be required. So some students require a lot of preparation, some do not require that much preparation. See, if this is your ultimate goal of how good you want to be on test day, your starting point and the starting point of your peers will be different. Some students already know how to do reading comprehension. A lot of students already know about critical reasoning. A lot of students already have a maths background. So when that is the case, you will require lesser time to prepare. But if you do not have a maths background, suppose you have not done any maths for like the last 2-3 years, it is going to take you more time. Now, how much time would it take? See, basically, the only way you can figure out where you are starting from is by taking a diagnostic test. So once you take a diagnostic test, you will figure out that, okay, I want to score my targeted score, the programs that I want to actually apply to require me to score up to 720, say. So this is my target score. These are the programs that I want to apply to. This is my profile. Based on that, my target score needs to be 720. Now, once you have figured out your target score is 720, you take the diagnostic test. Once you take the diagnostic test, you know that you're okay. You're at 400. Now, the first thing that you have to do is to go from 400 to 720. You have to figure out how much time it is going to take you. What is your strength? What is your weaknesses? What are the areas or sections that you are strong in? What are the areas and sections you are weak in? All of GMAT is one score, but all of GMAT is not uniform. Many people are very strong in one section and weaker in the other 2 sections. So how do you actually figure out how you should actually, how much time it will require, how you should go about it? See, basically when you go from 400 to 500, This is mostly, this jump comes from conceptual learning. If you learn all the concepts, you will get that initial jump as such. If you go through all the videos, understand all the topics that are there, understand how to answer questions based on the different topics, the formulas that are used, you will get this initial jump from 400 to 500. If you already know all the formulas, but you have not practiced anything at all, you can go learn the formulas, go up to 500. But to go from 500 to 600, this will require some more effort rather than just conceptual learning. Still, concepts are needed. People, if you are at 500, clearly there is no conceptual clarity, full conceptual clarity is not there. So to go from 500 to 600 also, you will need some more concept building. But here, to actually see this improvement between 500 and 600, you need practice. And practice is basically where things start becoming difficult to do. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of patience. A lot of people get demotivated when they start practicing, because you go through questions and there are many questions you're not able to solve. So if you go through 5 questions and you're not able to solve a single one of them, it can become very demotivating. So generally this part, going from 500 to 600, is generally the hardest, because you have to start practicing, and initially you will get demotivated when you see that, okay, you are finding it very difficult to solve questions, but you should keep at it. The next part is going from 600 to 720. This is almost entirely practice driven. The more you practice, the more you solve questions, the better you're going to be. From 600, if you're at 600 level, you probably know all the concepts already, you know all the formulae, you know what the questions asked are about. So it's not about learning concepts anymore. It is about practicing. So how much practice will be required? So basically every 10 points improvement will require, say, 10 hours of practice. That's a thumb rule that I say, that 6 to 610, you require 10 hours of practice. 10 hours of solving questions, analyzing questions, understanding what the mistakes were, understanding where you made an error. That is basically what is required. So going from 600 to 720, that is a 12-point jump. That's a 120 hours as such. Now 120 hours is quite a lot, but if you already have some amount of practice in quant, etc., it won't be that difficult. This is basically, you have to identify which section requires more practice, because everybody will have their strengths and weaknesses, and you have to figure out what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and wherever is your area of weakness, you have to spend a lot of time practicing that particular area. Now let's consider the ideal time to kick off the prep. We would suggest that you should start around March. So if you start in March and April, why is this the ideal time to actually start the preparation? See, March to April, what happens is that it is just a 3 months before your round 1 application starts. So round 1 application start in June. So June, July, you will find that round 1, many programs have opened their application window for the round 1 interviews. So if you start in March and April, you will just be ready. So this is March, this is April, this is May, this is June, and in June to say July, they start the application window. The application window is not just 1 month, you can apply till September, October as such, but the window starts in this period. So you can essentially start preparing in this period, have 3 months heads up, so that once the application window actually opens, you have covered most of the portion, practice quite a bit, and you're ready for the GMAT exam. Okay, in the 3-month period as such. This is what you should try to do, that you prepare 3 months before the application window opens, so that you are ready to give the exam once the first application window opens. So the basic idea is, why do we say that you should take your mock somewhere between May to June? Why is it that this is a good time to take your mock? Because this is when your round of interviews are going to start. Your seriousness will be there once you know that, okay, there is an application window that is starting. Once there is a deadline that is there, you would automatically become more serious about it. But the bigger reason why you should do it in this period between May and end of May and start of June is that if you actually take your test early enough, you will have the opportunity to retake the test if the GMAT doesn't go according to plan. So if your scores are not what you want them to be, then you have opportunity to retake them before the window closes in September and October. This is when the window closes. You can take the test again before September end, when the window is going to start closing. So how do you take it? Basically, between the first test and the second test, you have to identify which sections did not go as per plan, which questions you struggled with. You have to focus on figuring out what sections you are not doing well in, what type of questions you are not doing well in, and practice them like crazy, so that between the first test and the second test, you can improve on those factors and then retake the test. So the ideal time to start your preparation should be March, April, and you should aim to take the test somewhere in May, June, and if needed, take the test or retake the test somewhere in August and September. Now let's take a look at a tentative study plan that we have. If you're starting on 1st of March, how should you begin this particular preparation? So wherever we are asking you to prepare QR, we have put quant reasoning there. Wherever we are asking you to prepare VR, we have put VR verbal reasoning there. So over here, when I put quant reasoning or verbal reasoning, I'm indicating that you should do concept coverage. So start with quant concepts, arithmetic, algebra. These are important concepts that you should cover. Number theory, statistics. Statistics you can do later. Start with arithmetic or start with number theory, then go on to algebra, and then go finally to statistics as such. So focus a lot on conceptual building in the first month. In the first month, you should try to learn all the formulae that as much as possible, all the concepts as much as possible, so that you can then focus on practice part in the next 2 months. So in the first month, focus on having conceptual clarity. You should know exactly what is being asked in every question. You should know all the formulas. You should know all the concepts. What you will see is that initially we are not giving a lot of practice tests. Initially you are taking them only on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and 2 mocks as such on 2 weekends. Generally we have more time on the weekends, right? We have lesser time on the weekdays, we have more time on the weekends. So we expect you to also actually have more time on the weekends, and because of that we put more work on the weekends, because a mock will require some amount of time, and to analyze the mock also will require the same time as the mock as such. So with that, you will require a considerable amount of time to go through all the questions to understand where you made a mistake, what kind of concept did you not know, what error did you make. So to do that also you're going to take a lot of time. So put that on 2 Sundays of the first month. Now a lot of students don't do this. They don't take the mock to begin with. They take the mock in the 3rd month of preparation. They don't do any mock in the 1st month of preparation. We believe this is a big mistake, because unless you take a mock, you are not going to know where you stand. You are not going to know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and your study plan has to be designed according to your strengths and weaknesses. A diagnostic test alone will not really tell you what your strengths and weaknesses are, especially at a topic level. You're not going to know that. So it's important not just to take a diagnostic test, but also to take the mocks in the 1st month of preparation itself. So take the mocks by the 2 mocks in the 1st month of preparation. Focus more on concept building and conceptual clarity, and do a little bit of practice. Ideally, the number of hours required in a weekday are 1 to 2 hours. If you're doing 1 to 2 hours, focus mostly, if you have only 1 hour, focus mostly on like seeing all the concepts and understanding like the concepts as such. If you have 1.5 hour, if you have 1 hour more or half an hour more, what you can do is that after you've done the concepts, you can try practicing them so that the concepts become more fixed in your head, they become clearer in your head. So a little bit of practice will go a long way in actually making sure that the concepts stick in your mind. Without that practice, it will be difficult to hold on to the concepts. So first month is very important in terms of getting the schedule right, in getting all the concepts done, in getting all the formulas done, in getting all the base or fundamental concepts out of the way. Okay, now the second month is the month of April. In this case, what should you do? So basically in the first month I had put only QR and VR videos. So why had I done that? The reason is that for DI, data and insights, you need a base of QR. So unless you have completed arithmetic, unless you have completed statistics, unless you have completed algebra, it is difficult for you to solve data sufficiency questions. Moreover, even data insights questions such as like correlation and graphic representation, etc., require an understanding of statistics from quant reasoning. So what we suggest is that do VR and QR in the first month, and when you are doing QR, the statistics part, okay, do it simultaneously with the data insights part. So for the first month, when you are doing the QR part in the first month, do number theory, do algebra, do arithmetic, but more of that algebra and more of the statistics part should be done in the second month, so that you can do data insights at the same time as you are covering these topics, because then what will happen is that you will find it easier to solve the data insights questions. The base concepts would be fresher in your mind. So basically you should delay the data insights preparation till the second month, and you should do that in conjunction with learning about statistics concepts and algebra concepts also. Moreover, doing the data insights questions without a base of QR is impossible. To solve data sufficiency questions, for example, you need all of the QR to be done, then you will be able to solve data sufficiency questions. So essentially, data insights should be kept for the second month, so that once your QR fundamentals are in place, it is easier to learn from the data insights portion. Now, another thing that you would notice between the first month and the second month is that in the second month, you have to spend a lot more time practicing. See, between your first month and the second month, what we always recommend our students is that suppose you have 3-month study plan, for example, okay. So initially when you start studying, you would spend almost 100% of your time on learning different concepts or learning the new concepts that are there. But once you've learned all the concepts, there isn't a lot of concepts left to learn. What you have to focus on is essentially practicing. Because without practicing, you're not going to be able to do well in the actual exam. There are a few formulas that you need to know, there are a few concepts that you need to know, but essentially to really be able to solve the questions, you need a lot of practice. So as you see, between the first month and the second month, you have to increase the practice and decrease the amount of concepts that you are learning. You will be essentially covering the concepts. So time that you give to concepts versus practice in the first month, if it is like 1.5 hours to concepts, half an hour to practice, in the next month, in the second month, it should be like 1 hour to learning, 1 hour to practice. And in the third month, it should be half an hour to learning and 1.5 hours to practice. The reason why that distribution should be there is that once all your base concepts and important concepts are done, you should focus more on essentially drilling them in your head by practicing. The more questions you practice, the better you're going to get. If you do not practice a whole lot of questions, it is going to be very difficult to do well in the actual exam. So you have to learn that, okay, after the first month, I have to spend more and more time on practicing questions rather than just learning the concepts. Now let's come to the last month, which is the May month. So suppose that on May 31st, you are planning to take the exam. So what I would suggest is that focus almost in the last month, focus on a lot of mocks, analyzing the mocks. This is very important because without analyzing the mocks, you're not going to identify which are the weak spots. You will not identify what are your weaknesses. And without that, you won't be able to see any improvement. To see improvement in GMAT, you have to identify where you're making mistakes and essentially eliminate those mistakes as such. Find out areas where you're actually getting confused or you end up making mistakes, and you have to prevent yourself from doing that. That's basically how you see a score improvement. And that can only come from mocks plus analysis of mocks. Over here, I have put a lot of QR and DI concepts, mostly your VR concepts. There are not many VR concepts as such, to like reading comprehension and critical reasoning. So not much that you have to do over there. So mostly in the last month, you have to do a lot of practice for verbal reasoning and a lot of practice for quant reasoning and data insights. And basically in this last month, just focus on solving. So whatever time that you have, if you have 2 hours, you should spend at least 1.5 hours solving questions. If you do that, you will see that you also get momentum before the test day. You have to have positive momentum before you go to the test day, because then you will be confident on the test day. You will be less jittery. So for all of that, focus mostly on practice in the last month, and in the last month, take a lot of mocks. Every weekend, you should be taking a mock. One more thing that you will notice is that we have put rest days. It's important to have rest just before the exam. A lot of people tend to mug up just before the exam. So suppose if they have exam on 31st, they spend the day before the exam as well as the morning of the exam trying to mug up as much as possible. This is not good. Imagine it in this way. Your exam is actually you running a marathon. So if you're running a marathon, before you run a marathon, the day before you run a marathon, you should take rest. You should allow your legs to rest and recuperate. You should not run on the day before the marathon so as to not tire yourself out. So before your actual test day, we would recommend that relax. Do not see a lot of videos, do not see anything that will actually get you worked up or will actually tax your brain in any way. You should like take a walk, do things that are relaxing, get a good night's sleep. All of these are super important so that you go to the test day in a very relaxed state as such. Okay. So now let's go to the mock strategy plan. So we have mentioned mocks in the study plan. So let us try to identify when should you take the mocks, what should be the frequency of mocks, how many mocks are needed to really do well. So let us consider the basic thing that you need to keep in mind while you're drafting your mock strategy. Your mock strategy might be different from another person's mock strategy. So it's not like, okay, there is one size fits all. So what should you keep in mind before you draft your mock strategy? See, you have to figure out where you are actually lacking. So some students are weak in quant, some students are weak in verbal reasoning. some students have no practice of data insights. Now, if that is the case, basically what are you looking for? You are looking for targeted practice for a particular section. So in case you are, say, weak in all three sections, you need a longer space between, say, the mocks, mock 1 and mock 2. You need, in this case, you need at least 2 weeks to actually cover all the like to analyze the mock, to improve on the mock, to find out all the areas of improvement, and to actually work and improve on them. You need at least 2 weeks. But suppose you are okay at quants and data insights but weak at verbal reasoning, then you can take the next mock almost immediately afterwards. So you can then take, if you're okay in 2 subjects but only weak in 1 subject, you can basically take it every week as such. You can take it 1 week apart, because in this 1 week it would be enough time for you to analyze the mock as well as work on 1 section before you take the next mock as such. So essentially how much time you have to spend between the mocks depends on how many sections you need to improve in, how many sections are your strength and how many are your weaknesses. Now let's take a look at I've shown 2 different strategies. The first strategy is for somebody who is taking GMAT for the first time, when you don't have a whole lot of experience. Then we basically ask you to go slightly slow with taking mocks. So in the first month, take 2 mocks on the 2nd and the 5th weekend. This mock is extremely important in understanding your strengths and weaknesses, understanding your level of preparation, and understanding your preparation as such. Without this second mock, it will be very difficult for you to gauge how many mocks are needed, how much time is needed to improve. So this mock is the most pivotal mock in both this. You should take this mock. You would have some idea of some arithmetic concepts or some quant concepts by the end of 2nd week, and you would be able to solve at least a few questions based on that. So even if your entire portion is not over, even if you have not like read everything, still take the mock by the 2nd week, because this is important to set the goals, to set the target, to have an understanding of how much time will be required, how much effort will be required, how often you can take mocks. All of that will depend on this mock essentially. So if you are somebody who is going to take a lot of time to improve, pace yourself such that initially you keep them at least 1 week or 2 weeks apart. And between these time, focus a lot on smaller practice tests, smaller set solving. So instead of taking an entire mock, you can solve, for example, you can solve more questions from the data insights. You can solve more questions from quant reasoning. For example, we have an excellent study room where we have thousands of questions with video solutions on quant reasoning, verbal reasoning, and data insights. So once you actually start solving the mocks, you will realize that, oh, no, I need more targeted practice. So between mocks, do the targeted practice and then attempt the mock again. So this is for somebody who is taking GMAT for the first time and requires more time to improve between mocks. But if you are somebody who has taken GMAT before, you are fairly confident of your attempt, if you have some idea of what the portion is already, if you are fairly near to your target goal, if target score as such, if it's not very difficult for you, if you're able to grasp the concepts easily, if you're able to give a lot of time for preparation, then for you the accelerated path is given in the second path. So over here there are again 2 mocks in the first month, but from the 2nd month onwards you are taking mocks almost every weekend. So you have to take a mock every weekend, because every weekend you should have that schedule that you take the mock, you analyze the mock. In case you are somewhere in between somebody who doesn't know anything about GMAT to somebody who is an expert in taking GMAT, if you are somewhere in between, you can shift from plan A to plan B, somewhere in the middle. So if you take mocks every weekend from the 2nd month on, you will get 10 mock tests done, which is an excellent number. If you take only, or if you take them like have a more sparing schedule for mock, you will end up taking 7 mock tests, which is still fine. It's not a bad number at all. So if you are somebody, so suppose by the 7th week or so, you realize that, okay, I'm doing well, I can shift the gear up a bit. So then you can shift from this part to this part in the 8th week, and you will end up taking 8 mocks as such. Or if by the end of the 2nd month you realize, you know what, I actually know what I'm doing over here, I'm able to solve most of the questions, then you can shift and do 8 mocks and all. So essentially it depends on where you start from and how much progress you see as such. You should give yourself more time if you see that you need more time to improve between the mocks, but you can also do mocks every weekend if you just want a lot of practice before giving the actual exam. Now, a lot of people will be wondering what mocks should I take, when should I take them. So the mocks that I would recommend you definitely take is that if you register at mba.com, you get 2 free mocks along with there are 4 paid ones as such. I would highly recommend you actually buying those mocks and taking all 6 of them, because they are excellent mocks and which are very important to actually do well in GMAT. If you're looking for additional practice beyond these 6 mocks, we have an excellent quant sectional at GMAT. If you're looking for practice in addition to these 6 mocks, we have excellent quant sectionals at gmatpoint.com. But what I would suggest is, more than just the sectionals or the mocks, have targeted practice between the mocks. So once you take a mock, you analyze the mock, you realize I'm not doing well in this section. Solve a lot of questions from that section. Without taking a full length mock, you can solve a lot of questions from the section, either by taking a sectional. We have an excellent quant sectional on gmatpoint.com, or you can just solve practice tests from our platform. This will help you considerably in improving between your mocks as such. Okay, so this is basically the mock strategy plan for taking the GMAT. It's a 3-month plan. It tells you how exactly you should space out your preparation as well as your mock attempts. I hope that this is useful for you, and best of luck for your GMAT preparation.